Who's Jill? Hiya, it's Hiya and welcome back to my channel. So today I am here with my July wrap-up. So this month I wanted to talk about all of the books that I read as well as all of the TV shows and movies that I watched, which was a lot. And I did not read very many physical books. I think I read a total of 5 books, 2 of which were from the library, and then the rest I did read as audiobooks. So every month I write down the titles of each of the books and then my thoughts as soon as I finish the book, just so I don't forget anything. So I have a lot of things to say and way little time to say them, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first book that I read was for summer reading, and if you know me at all, you know I hate summer reading. This is the first year I've had to do it because I was at a different school previously, and it is the worst because these books are very old and I don't know if it's just not me understanding things or if they're truly bad books, so I have a lot of thoughts on them. If we want to see a whole video on that, I truly can give that to you. So either way, the first book I read was a physical book from my library, and that was The Kite Runner by, oh, I forget who the author is, by somebody. And I rated this book 1.5 stars. Now, I hate this book. I read the last half of it in a blind rage. I was so frustrated. However, I don't know if it was just me not fully understanding why this book was so impactful or why this book was summer reading or why I just didn't fully grasp it, because I am obviously very young and I don't have a lot of experience. However, there was some things in this book that just shouldn't be in books and shouldn't be handled in this way that they were. So one of the main plot points in this book is that the main character watches their best friend be raped by a different character, and this happens very early on in the book, and they're both very young, and then they grow up. However, this main character doesn't have very many repercussions from it. He does lose his best friend as he moves away after ignoring him, and later on in the book things happen, and it's more of a redemption, and this character feels the upset from doing such a horrible thing and not stopping this rape, but also doesn't get a lot. I can't talk about this book very much without spoiling it, but just know that there is repercussions, but they aren't very big or explored, and this major part of both of these people's lives is mostly pushed off to the side. If that makes any sort of sense. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. The main character is awful and judges literally everybody, and it's just a lot. Honestly, this book is a lot. And the character that rapes the friend, he then is part of the Taliban, but then he's still a head honcho at the end of the book. He's still living and fine. He's still hurting a lot of people. So that's never. The next 2 points I have to make are about the actual writing and not so much the characters or the plot. Everything that happened was so coincidental. I mean, this one character, their mom was a teacher, and one of the teachers he taught with, this main character just randomly rolled up and was like, "You knew my mother?" And it was just, really? That happened? Are you sure it happened, or are you just making stuff up? It was just, this happened so often that by the end of the story I was like, okay. And that probably contributed to the reason why this book just didn't feel well, didn't sit well. And then all of the major plot lines that just didn't seem like they were handled very well just were extra awful because of all the coincidences. And then I wanted to understand why this book was so important, why so many people understood it, but every review I read by either a non-white or non-Western person just didn't see why this book was so good. It was a lot, honestly. The other thing was the foreshadowing. If I heard, "and then I didn't sit for another week," or "and then I didn't talk for another week," or "and then I didn't do something for such an amount of time," I was going to blow my own head off. It was so frequent. It's like me saying, "and now I'm going to film a video," and then proceeding to tell you how I'm going to film said video. It was so much. I don't know, montage it, bro. Come on. On a very similar note, he explained things so unnecessarily. He would be like, and then the apple was red, and then proceed to tell me why it was red. 'Cause it is. This book has a lot of trigger warnings, so I'm only going to mention the ones that I can remember because I didn't write them down right away, and so if this does trigger you, please, please look out for this. This book has so many things that are in it if you do plan on reading it, and that includes rape, racism, like the Taliban, terrorism, murder, like war and torture and child rape, lots of things of that nature. So please, please be aware of that if you do need to read this or want to read this or whatever. The next book I read was a 4-star book that I listened to the audiobook of. I absolutely really liked this book. It was absolutely remarkable in a lot of ways, and that is an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. So I'm about to tell you what my thoughts are for An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, but I totally forgot to give you a synopsis for this and many of the books later in this video. So I'm going to just insert clips from This Me before I talk about my thoughts, because I still don't know how to properly film, even though I've been doing booktube for a month. So, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing basically follows April May as she comes across this robot in New York, and she sees this and she names it Carl, and they happen to be filming a video, so they post the video in the morning and it instantaneously goes viral, and it just follows her as she's dealing with the Carl situation while being famous, trying to figure out what happened, and a lot of things happen to her, to the world, and at the same time there is a total of 60-some Carls all over the world, and it's interesting to see what happens, and she thinks, well, what if I wasn't the person that came across him first, and it's very interesting to see, and I very much enjoyed it. So now, Hank and John are very different authors, and I really liked Hank's writing and storytelling a lot more than John's. His writing was a lot better. It was sometimes weird, but honestly a lot of writers have some weird aspects to their writing, and it was honestly really good. I enjoyed a lot of the storytelling. It moved pretty quickly. Everything had a reason, and every sentence seemed like it was placed there with a reason. It didn't just seem like sentences were thrown about carelessly. I loved April May. She was so unlikable and quirky and cool, and I liked seeing the way Hank wrote about fame and how it is tears, as April talks about, and how she saw herself moving slowly through fame and how it differently affected her and how she thought about things differently and how she thought about herself differently. And I really liked that inclusion because celeb culture is so prominent in our world. To see that written about from the aspect of a celeb was so cool. It really sheds a different kind of light on a situation that I obviously don't know much about. It was honestly very good, and I very much applaud Hank for being able to write such a part of him in a book that a lot of people don't understand or know about, because there's 7 billion of us in the world and we all can't understand it. Okay, the only thing I don't know if I liked or not, that sounds weird, but I don't have a lot of background in the sci-fi genre. I want to get more into it. I'm trying to diversify my genres because I mostly read contemporary, but I don't know if this book was very unique or quote-unquote good in people that read sci-fi, but for me personally, I very much enjoyed this story. It seemed very different, but very similar, and it was very good. I liked seeing robots and humans and aliens and all of these things thrown together, but in a way that I hadn't heard before in synopses and different ways. It was very good, and I very much appreciated it. For An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, the biggest trigger warning I can give is some graphic violence, but in the story it literally says, this next part is going to have some super graphic violence. There is that trigger warning during that. I just wanted to also make it aware. Also, I'm just noticing how much my arms are moving because I'm looking at the camera, which is over here, and then I just see in the corner of my eye. So that's fun. Now I'm moving my elbows. I'm just going to move my arms. The third book I read was another summer reading book. It was also 1.5 stars, except for I might have hated this book more than The Kite Runner, but for different reasons. And that is The Stranger by Albert Camus. So The Stranger basically So I kind of tell you what The Stranger is about based on my thoughts, but I wanted to give a more clear synopsis. It follows a man in a slice of life story from right before his mother dies all the way to his death. And it is a time. It just honestly follows his day-to-day life, and my thoughts kind of sum this up a little bit more clearly. So this book was a translated book, so that might be the reason why I hated it so much. But the writing was absolute garbage. I was trying to explain it to my aunt, who is from Florida, and and she was like, yeah, I'm sure at a 12th grade reading level they would not be such stupid sentences. But I kid you not, there were sentences that went with different words. The apple was red. Red was the color of the apple. The apple went down the street. The apple decided to party. The party was fun. The party lasted all night. The party lasted till 4 a.m. The party was over. Now, that might have been a stylistic choice because this book follows like a death row and the main character dealing with it. But the main character was a sociopath, and I literally didn't care about this book at all. This main character was the literal worst. Like, worse or just as bad as the main character in The Kite Runner. He didn't care about anything. His mom dies. He kills somebody, like, he shoots this person, and then shoots him and shoots him and shoots him and shoots him, like 17 times in a row. I think it was only 5, but still. And he's like, he goes to court. Gonna be in jail forever. Gonna get hanged. Didn't care about a single thing, and it was just so frustrating that I was supposed to root for this person, that I was supposed to care about this unlikable twat that just didn't care about anything. That it was a lot. I don't know how to properly talk about this book without just screaming because it makes me very angry. It also kind of advocated for abuse. This character, who's the worst, was like, yeah, just beat up this girl that's cheating on you. The way to handle cheating is not to beat up your wife, but you know, it was also written in the 40s, and maybe that was a thing because I wasn't born in the 40s, but at the same time, I don't think that should be the message. And if that is the message in that time, fine, whatever. But I am a teenager living in the 21st century in America. Why is this my summer reading? And it's over-sexualized women. He first saw this person, and the first thing he said was about her breasts. Okay, I thought we were trying to move past that. Maybe it shouldn't be for summer reading. Now, this book on its own might be great for its time and won a bunch of awards, but for summer reading, I think somebody needs to reevaluate which books we should be talking about, which books that should be, like, pushed, because this book was garbage. I hate this book. And trigger warnings for this book include, like, death row, abuse, and just stuff of that nature. The next 7 books I'm going to talk about I read for the reading rush, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I do want to at least briefly mention them because this is my July wrap-up. First book I read was one of my absolute favorites of this entire readathon. It was so good. And I rated this one 4.5 stars. I think I rated Evelyn the same thing, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This follows the band The Six and also follows Daisy Jones, and it shows like what happened to make them come together for the album and why during the rise of their fame when they just released their first albums, why did they break up? What happened that they didn't want to make any more music? What do each of the people have to talk about? And it is set in interview format, and each person talks, and it's so good. I highly recommend the audiobook, but my full thoughts are this. This book is perfect. There's nothing wrong with this book. Except for maybe like the way it was written. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I had physically read it rather than listened to it, but it felt like a documentary. Like I was sitting in the room with all of these band members and their managers and people they met and Camilla, and I was just listening to them talk about their story, and it was just so captivating. I read this book in, I think, a little over a day. I just couldn't stop. At one point, I was just sitting here listening. I just listened, and I just was going, oh my god, 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 just over and over. It was so beautiful. It was so, so good. I have a very hard time believing that Evelyn Hugo characters and Daisy Jones characters are not real. That's ridiculous. They definitely are. I could really feel their emotions, and I could feel what was happening, and I could understand the decisions that they made, even if those decisions at the time were probably not the best. And I got where everybody was coming from, and I liked the unreliableness, and I liked how every character saw something differently, whether it just be the actual situation or how they remembered how somebody dressed. It was truly like listening to people try to remember things that happened 30 years ago, and it was honestly so beautiful, and the ending hurt a lot. The specific note at the end made me want to die, but in like a good way. I would just like to say that Eddie is a tool, and every time I heard Eddie, I wanted to scream because he was the worst, but also in like a good, like, conflicty way. It was so good. Also, the guy who voiced Billy had such a voice that I was just like, that's probably not something I should keep in this video. I do want to say there are a lot of trigger warnings for this book, as it is set in the 70s in like the band era. So there is substance abuse, alcoholism, underage drinking, abortion, rape. I think rape might be in it. I'm not sure. Self-harm. What else? Pedophilia, as in like managers and stuff, and that whole thing. Sex, abandonment, loss, all of those things are in the book. They're not like the main topic, but it is just mentioned. Like Daisy would be smoking or drinking, and then she would be writing or doing something at the same time. So it is there, so be aware of that if that is something that can be harmful for you. The book I listened to after that was The Diviners by Liv O'Bray, which I rated 4 stars. The Diviners is set in the 20s, and it is about a girl named Evie who is a diviner, which a diviner is a person that has a special power. So for Evie, she can touch an object and feel all of the things that it is like seen and its emotions, specifically if it was on somebody or if it has a personal value to somebody. And she is not the only diviner. It follows her and a couple other diviners, specifically Memphis, who used to have a healing power, and a couple other people that are totally slipping my mind because I'm very frazzled that I forgot to include synopsises. So it just follows them, and there's also this murder aspect. A couple of murders have shown up, and it's following that. And Evie is at her Uncle Will's place, who is the person that's in charge of this museum nicknamed the Creepy Crawlies, the Museum of the Creepy Crawlies. So it is very interesting, very good, and my thoughts. I loved this book. It was so good. I love all of these characters. Sam is a doll. I love him. Evie can be kind of irritating, but I also love her. Jericho, I was up in the air about in this book. Mabel, she was just kind of there. I don't know if I like her. Yeah. Theta, I love Theta. She's the best. And this book just brought me all of the feels. There was like the murder aspect of it, which I accidentally said in the previous video that I love murder. Just like the seeing how that's like presented, and this book was set in more of like a culty way. There was like unlikable characters, but they were likable in their own way, and the divining aspect was just so good. I really, really enjoyed this book. There's not much more to say about this, so I am going to say again, trigger warnings for rape, murder, racism, abortion, attempted rape, domestic violence, animal cruelty, just things of the times it is set in the 20s, which this like was so cool. The next audiobook I listened to after that was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This book follows this family of 5 whose daughter is dead. The first line is, Lydia is dead, but nobody knows it yet, so it's not a spoiler. And it just follows the parents and the siblings having to deal with the death of their daughter, and it was heart-wrenching and good and not great, but also kind of good. I rated it 3 stars, so I'm kind of in the middle about it. Or I rated it 3.5 stars. It was honestly just, it was there, you know, it was there. The writing style was not great, but I think it was a stylistic choice because it felt like parents trying to dissociate from this horribleness of their daughter being dead and nobody understanding or knowing why, and finding out what actually happened, but that nobody would never find out, was just heart-wrenching, and the dissociative style made it much easier to read, even though it was a harder style to get into. I was saying in my story that it kind of reads like a John Green novel, specifically looking for Alaska, whereas there's like all of these characters trying to figure out what happened and where this girl went and what happened, but a lot better than Looking for Alaska. At the time, I thought it was great, but looking back, that story is not the best, so that's kind of how I pitched this book. Lots of trigger warnings, again, for suicide, depression, cheating, as in an affair, sexism, and I don't really know how to say this, but like they ignore their children a lot. They clearly have a favorite one, so if those are some things that are going to bother you, just be aware. The next two books were rereads for me. These are a series everybody knows about. I'm not going to tell you what they're about. I rated Goblet of Fire 3.5 stars and Order of the Pheonix 5 stars. The way I've been rating these books is I listed all of the books from favorite to least favorite, and I just did 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 3, 2.5. That's how I rated the books. It's kind of how I'm doing it. I don't really want to get into specifics about like issues with these books. People know that there's issues with them. People know that there's issues with JK. I don't need to get into details. I adore this series. It is one of the first things I read. I vividly remember going into second grade and reading the first 4 books and then being told I couldn't read the 5th one because it wasn't mature enough for audiences. So I have read these books a dozen times and I adore them. And so yeah, last audiobook I read this month was the sequel to The Diviner's Layer of Dreams, which I actually rated 4.5 stars. I loved this book so much. It was so good. Everything about the first book that I didn't like just got so much better with this one. I just very much enjoyed it. It was very, very good, and I highly recommend it to absolutely everybody. I loved the inclusion of like Henry and Ling and all of these characters, and everything that was wrong with the first book was just made so much better. There was a more diverse cast. She stopped doing like major backstory episodes. Chapters, it was just kind of like included into the story, which was an issue I had with the first book. This book is honestly so much better than the first, and I absolutely adored it. Trigger warnings in this book for the same thing, except for major inclusion of the Chinese Exclusion Act. So if that's something that's going to bring up a lot of painful memories, please be aware of that. Hi, also there is a major trigger warning for PTSD. Evie shows it in the form of over-drinking and getting very wasted and partying way too much. It is very clear that it is PTSD, although it is not specifically stated because it is the 20s, but please be aware of that. That is very present throughout this entire novel. The last book that I read for the readathon and in July was a short story collection that I read a couple of short stories throughout the week, and that is The Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. This features Magnus Bane from like the 1800s and like some in the 1900s and some with his boyfriend Alec, and I loved this story. There were certain stories I loved a lot more than others, but some of the last stories specifically were so good. It was so cute and fun, and I just absolutely adored this book. So during one of the readathon vlogs, I did give specific star ratings for each of the stories, so I figured I could quickly go through each of those. The first story, What Really Happened in Peru, I gave 3 stars. The Runaway Queen, I gave 2 stars. Vampire Scones and Edmund Herondale, I gave 3.5 stars. The Midnight Air, I gave 5 stars. The Rise of Hotel de Mort, I gave 3 stars. Saving Rafael Santiago, I gave 3.5 stars. And The Fall of the Hotel de Mort, I gave 4 stars. What to Buy a Shadowhunter Who Has Everything and You're Not Officially Dating, I gave 4.5 stars. The Last Stand of the New York Institute, I gave 2 stars. The Course of True Love, I gave 5 stars. And The Voicemail of Magnus Bane, I gave 4 stars. I really thought this collection was well done. Cassandra does not write as good with people that she does on her own. I know this is a popular opinion. I just think she has a strong writing on her own that when she writes with someone else, it just kind of gets downplayed a little bit. I know that's not the right word, and I know that's probably not very nice to these lovely authors that did write with her. However, I just don't think that this story was as good as it could have been if it was just written by Cassandra. Those are all the books that I read in July. I am going to now talk about movies and TV shows, but if that's not for you, that's cool. Adios. I watch a lot of TV and movies with my mom and my sister. We're big movie buffs. We quote things all the time, from movies to TV shows to things we rewatch very often. And we do this because we like to spend time together because we don't see each other very often between dance and school and work and everybody just being very busy and social. Well, kinda. We don't play games very often because we are a very competitive family, and that kind of goes awry very often. I've been banned from a couple of places, and specifically by them, because we just get very intense. So movies are an easy way to watch something kind of mindlessly, be there with each other. We'll just talk about life while watching a movie we've seen 50 times. It's something that we've always done, and probably something that we always will do. Me and my sister joke that when I go to college next year, we're going to FaceTime each other and watch movies, and I honestly wouldn't put it past each other. Wouldn't put it past us, because that is something that we're just very into. We're very close, and this is something that helps bring us closer because it is something that our opinions are very close on, whereas with reading it could be very different because I'm very critical. My mom's kind of just reads however, and my sister is kind of in the middle. The first thing that I watched on my own was a rewatch of New Girl seasons 1 through 5. I'm going to watch the last 2 seasons again next month. I have legitimately watched this show about 50 times. While I was doing schoolwork this past year, I would kind of just have it on the background. This is a show that just genuinely makes me very happy. It's something that just doesn't bring me any harm or something that I could just laugh to when life just honestly sucks. I'm going to continue to watch it the rest of my life, and every wrap-up there's probably going to be something about me talking about it. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with this show. Every single character is funny and great, and if you haven't watched the show, I'm going to recommend it to you, because it's fantastic. The only other TV show that we watched this year was Stranger Things Season 3, which I loved. It is honestly the best season so far. There's so many characters that I love. I love watching these kids grow up and get older, and it's such a good time. I love so much. Mom Steve is the best. I liked some of the new characters that they included, and I liked the change in characters, and I liked the development of characters that I was kind of iffy on. I liked how Max and Eleven finally have a good girl relationship, because that unnecessary girl hate from season 2 was just kind of making me very angry. I liked seeing Billy be very different. It made me not hate him as much. And Steve is the best. Everybody should stand Steve. So I am a Disney person, if you were not aware. I did watch 2 Disney movies this month. So at the beginning of the month, I watched Tangled, which I love. I love Flynn Rider, and I just love this movie so much. It's so cute and fun, and there's so many different songs. If you haven't seen this, where have you been? That's all I have to say. And the other one I just watched this week. Well, I watch periodically throughout the week. I have a very bad habit of just starting a movie, pausing it, and then not picking it back up for weeks. So yeah, I watched The Princess and the Frog. I love Naveen. He's the best. Tiana's nuts about herself. This movie's perfect. It's one of my favorite Disney movies. It's the best. And it's finally on Netflix, so I don't have to actually put in the DVD, which I very much appreciate. My baby cousins come over once a month, just so we can watch them and give their parents a break. So when they did come over, we watched Cars 1 and 2. It's Cars. I don't know how to critique Cars. It's Cars. It's great. It's a time. The first movie's a lot of good. The second movie's good. The third movie's not, hence we didn't watch it. And yeah. Then when we went to North Carolina, I did watch Chasing Liberty, featuring Mandy Moore and some British guy. It was so a stupid contemporary, and I love these kinds of movies. And they're so predictable and so stupid, and I absolutely adore it. It's so great, and it's just what's gonna happen when she finds out that he's lying? And it's a time, honestly. I don't recommend these movies, but if you're looking for just a good time, because we're here for a good time, not a long time, this is your movie. Then when we got back from vacation, we watched Far From Home. Now, I am 16 years old, and there have been Marvel movies for 11 years? I have gone the weekend of release since Iron Man 2. I don't think I saw it with Iron Man 1. I think we watched it when it came out on DVD because I was 5. But every single movie, pretty much, we have seen the weekend of release. Usually a Tuesday, because it's $5 Tuesdays at our movie theater. So I have seen them all. I had to wait 2 weeks to see Far From Home, and it was the most stressful 2 weeks I've ever seen, because you have to avoid everything. I was being very careful on every social media. but it was so good. I love Tom Holland, and I obviously very much enjoyed Endgame because it was like the big movie. And the ending of that movie obviously caused some big things for this movie, and I liked seeing how it was handled, and such a big part of the franchise is over, and to see that explored in this new phase was just so cool. And I liked the villain. My mom was not a fan of that because she does like the elementals being used very much, and the what happened in the movie she wasn't a big fan of. However, I kind of knew that was going to happen based on the villain of the movie, and so I wasn't very disappointed, but she was, and I can understand why. The movie is very good, and I very much enjoyed it. If you haven't seen this new Spider-Man reboot, honestly go see it. The Tobey Maguire movies are very good, and I thought they were done well, except for the third one, because we don't talk about it. The Andrew Garfield movies could have been better. I think the script wasn't very good, and obviously they fired him for some reasons that I would love to talk about, but I don't have enough time for it. And Into the Spider-Verse is honestly the best adaptation, but nobody talks about it because it's a cartoon, and that's just the tea. And if I had something to drink, tea. The mother frickin' tea. I have to clean that all up. Well, we're gonna do that later. So my sister has this friend, and I'm not going to name names because that's her privacy, but her and her sister are the same ages as me and my sister. So my sister and this girl's sister have been friends for like the past year. So they thought it would be cool if we met each other because we're both weird and crazy and honestly not normal and probably alien. So we all met and we all hung out, and we went to the pool and we just had a fun day. And then we watched Coraline, which is fantastic. And if anybody wants an adaptation, please unsubscribe because the original movie is so great. And then, which I love, clearly. And then we also watched The Princess Bride because both of our families, because we're actually the same people, we know like one line and then somebody else will say the second line and we could just quote the whole movie because the movie is so quotable. So we decided to watch the movie, and the entire time we were just quoting every line. It was so great. And then the last movie I watched this month was Order of the Pheonix for the reading rush because I did read the book. So yeah, I think the book is the best in the franchise, but I do think that the first movie is the best. It just really has that wow factor, and I think they just kind of dwindle down. But that's just my personal opinion, as all of these are. Okay, so this month I am planning on watching Grey's season 15, and I want to watch the next 2 seasons of New Girl again. And I want to watch as many movies as possible and really just enjoy my last month of freedom before dance and school start. And then I want to read as much as possible. I do want to read on the come up, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, and I do have a 20 books I want to read in 2020 video coming very soon, so please subscribe if you haven't so you can stay tuned for that. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I love y'all so much. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!